You ever stop to think about who has access to your child's school records and what exactly they can see?
Yeah, it's a question that's probably hitting home for a lot of people lately.
Definitely. Well, today we're taking a direct route to get some answers. This deep dive is all about student data privacy in Virginia schools, especially with some recent signals coming from the federal level.
Exactly. We've got a really helpful piece here from the School Board Member Alliance that, it zeroes in on staying compliant with two really key federal laws, FERPA and PPRA.
Okay.
And our goal today is basically to make it crystal clear what these regulations mean for you as a parent in Virginia, sort of pulling out the crucial bits from this article so you don't have to wade through all the legal stuff.
Okay, so the article points out that this whole conversation, it really gained steam with a letter back in March of 2025 from the U.S. Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. What was the core message she was trying to get across?
Well, what's fascinating here is the fundamental point of Secretary McMahon's letter. It was essentially a strong reminder that FERPA, that's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and PPRA, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, are fundamentally there to, well, protect families like yours.
Right.
The letter really addressed these growing concerns that the laws were being maybe misinterpreted sometimes, leading schools to maybe withhold information or avoid transparency under the guise of protecting student privacy. And following that, the State Privacy Policy Office, the SPPO, they're the ones overseeing compliance. They requested documentation from all Virginia school divisions. They had a deadline, April 30th, to basically prove they were following the rules.
So it sounds like there was a feeling that maybe some schools were, I don't know, using these privacy laws almost as a shield instead of for actually protecting students.
That seems to be the underlying concern, yeah.
Okay, let's dive into FERPA first then. In, simple terms, what does it do? What are the most important rights it gives parents?
So if we break down FERPA, its main job, its whole purpose, is to safeguard the privacy of your child's education records. It's kind of the bedrock of student data privacy.
Gotcha.
And this law gives parents some really significant rights. You have the right to see and review all of your child's education records.
All of them.
Yes, and when we say all, the article really emphasizes this. It even includes things that might be labeled, unofficial. Think like gender support plans or maybe behavior reports.
Wow, okay. That's interesting.
It really is, because it means schools can't just hide important information about your child's well-being by simply calling it unofficial. That label doesn't make it exempt.
That's a huge clarification. I think a lot of parents might just assume, report cards, maybe transcripts. What's another really key right parents should know about under FERPA?
Okay, another absolutely critical thing to understand. Schools cannot use FERPA as an excuse to not share information about student threats or disciplinary actions.
Right, that makes sense for safety.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is so important for ensuring the safety of, well, everyone in the school environment.
Yeah.
The law is there to protect privacy, sure, but not to silence legitimate concerns about potential harm.
Okay.
And also remember that schools were required to notify you annually about your FERPA rights. You'll usually find this info somewhere like the student handbook, maybe the school website, or sometimes even the school calendar. Keep an eye out for that.
Good tip. Now, the article also touches on something else when school board members themselves can look at student records. What are the guidelines there? Seems a bit tricky.
It can be. This brings up an important point about accountability, right? Generally, it's acceptable for school board members to access student records if they have what's called a legitimate educational interest.
Meaning?
Well, the article gives examples like when they're involved in expulsion hearings or acting in a kind of quasi-judicial role, things directly related to their duties. However, and this is really important, it's against the rules for them to access records just out of curiosity or, for political reasons, or to share student information without a valid legal reason or outside of a properly closed confidential session.
So no fishing expeditions.
Exactly. Yeah. And the article makes a really good point that board members should always seek legal advice or at least guidance from the superintendent before asking for specific student information, just to avoid any potential violations.
That seems like a really crucial safeguard. Okay, let's switch gears now and talk about PPRA. What's the main focus of that law? How is it different from FERPA?
Right, so PPRA, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, it takes a slightly different angle. While FERPA is broadly about the privacy of education records, PPRA focuses specifically on your rights as a parent regarding surveys and the collection of data on sensitive topics.
Sensitive topics like?
Think about surveys that might ask about a student's mental health, their sexuality, political opinions, religious beliefs, those kinds of areas.
Right. Those are definitely areas where parents would want to be, informed and have some say. So what specific rights does PPRA give parents in those situations?
Okay, under PPRA, you have the right to be notified about these kinds of surveys. And, crucially, you have the right to choose to opt your child out of any surveys covering those sensitive areas we just mentioned.
Notification and opt-out. Got it.
Yes. You also have the right to review any curriculum materials, including the actual survey questions, before they're given to your child. Transparency there. And furthermore, the school needs your explicit consent, your permission, before they can collect your child's personal information for, say, marketing purposes or for any use that isn't directly tied to their instruction.
Now, the article we're looking at, it also highlights some specific points from that Secretary McMahon letter you mentioned earlier. Are there any examples there that really illustrate how these laws should be applied in practice?
Absolutely. And these specific examples, they really clarify the practical implications. One key point was the explicit mention of gender plans.
Ah, yes, that came up under FERPA too.
Right. Secretary McMahon made it very clear that these plans must be disclosed to parents. Simply labeling them unofficial doesn't get schools around FERPA requirements. That's a very direct and important clarification.
Definitely cuts through potential confusion.
Another critical point reinforces that FERPA cannot be used to hide threats to safety. The letter emphasizes that in situations involving student threats, both the student who made the threat and the student who was threatened and their families have the right to access the relevant records.
So access for both sides involved.
Exactly. It really underscores that balance between protecting privacy and ensuring safety. And finally, the letter also reminds schools about that obligation to provide high school student contact info to military recruiters.
Oh, right, the opt-out thing.
Unless you specifically choose to opt your child out. It's a practical piece of information many parents might not even be aware of. And the letter also stressed the need for school divisions to provide documentation policies, training materials to the SBPO, the state office, which explains why there's this increased focus right now.
Those are some really specific and important details. It definitely sounds like the federal government is trying to ensure these laws are being interpreted and, followed correctly.
That's clear signal, yes.
So based on all of this, what are some concrete actions the School Board Member Alliance suggests Virginia school boards should be taking right now? What should they be doing?
Well, the article lays out some very clear, actionable steps for them. First, they recommend confirming that the school division has indeed submitted its federal assurance of compliance, that paperwork saying, yes, we follow the rules. They should have done that already.
Yeah, check the box.
Right. Beyond that, it's crucial to actually review and, if necessary, update their policies that govern student records and how parents are informed of their rights. Are the policies clear? Are they current?
Makes sense.
They also suggest conducting a thorough review, like an internal audit, of how the division is currently handling sensitive areas. Things like gender support plans, threat assessments, any instances where student data is disclosed. How is it working in practice?
So not just the policy, but the actual procedures.
Exactly. And making sure all staff members receive adequate training on FERPA and PPRA is also essential. They even suggest requesting additional training if there are any uncertainties. Can't assume everyone knows the nuances.
Good point. Training is key.
And lastly, they need to double-check that there's a clear and easy process for families to opt out of having their high school students' contact information shared with military recruiters. Make sure that's accessible.
Okay, that's a solid checklist. So what if a parent believes their rights under these laws have been violated? What's the process for addressing that? Where do they go?
The article outlines a pretty straightforward process. First step, it encourages parents to try and resolve the issue locally. Talk to the school principal or the superintendent first.
Start local.
Yeah, see if it can be handled there. If that doesn't lead to a resolution, then parents have the option to file a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's Student Privacy Policy Office, the SPPO we mentioned.
Okay, the federal level.
Right. The article even provides the mailing address for that office.
Yeah.
And it's important to keep in mind there's a time limit. You generally have 180 days to file a complaint from the date you believe the violation actually occurred.
180 days. Good to know. And what kind of consequences could schools face if they are found to be in violation of FERPA or PPRA? What happens then?
Well, the potential penalties can vary. It depends on how serious the violation is, how often it's happened, They could include being required to take specific corrective actions, maybe provide additional training for their staff.
Like mandated changes.
Right. Schools might also have to revise their existing policies to make sure they actually comply with the law. And in more serious or repeated cases of noncompliance, the ultimate consequence could even be the loss of federal funding.
Wow, okay. That's significant.
It really underscores the seriousness with which the Department of Education views these privacy rights. It's not just a suggestion.
It certainly seems so. And now one thing the article clarifies is whether parents have the legal right to, well, sue under FERPA and PPRA. What's the situation there? Can you take them to court over this?
That's an important legal distinction they make. The article points out that currently, FERPA and PPRA themselves do not give parents a specific right to directly sue in federal court just for violations of these specific laws.
Okay, so no direct lawsuit under FERPA itself.
Okay, so no direct lawsuit under FERPA itself. Correct. However, it's also mentioned that families might still have legal options under, say, state law or even constitutional law if they believe broader rights have been violated. So while you can't file a federal lawsuit specifically citing FERPA or PPRA, it doesn't necessarily mean there's zero legal recourse available in every single situation. It's more nuanced.
That's a helpful clarification to have. So looking beyond just the legal requirements, the compliance checklists, what's the bigger picture here? Why should school boards and parents, too, see this as more than just, checking off boxes?
Yeah, and this is where it really connects back to you, the listener. The article rightly frames compliance as way more than just avoiding penalties. It's fundamentally about building and maintaining trust between schools and the families they serve.
Trust. That makes sense.
In today's world, with increasingly complex student data and all the intricacies of how schools are run, it's more critical than ever for you to have clarity, to feel like you're an informed and involved partner in your child's education.
Yeah, you want to feel like you're on the same team.
Exactly. And moving beyond simply following a checklist, really embracing the spirit of these laws, ensures that these protections aren't just words on paper. It means they're actively safeguarding students and empowering you as parents with the information you need. Strong local leadership is really key to making these protections a real, consistent part of the school experience. So, if you have concerns about a specific incident or maybe a developing situation, don't hesitate to request to see everything that's documented. Remember, these privacy laws are there to protect, not to create secrecy around potential harm.
That's a really important perspective. Okay, so to wrap things up then, what's the main point you'd want our listeners to take away from this whole deep dive?
I think the core message is this. FERPA and PPRA are designed to protect you and your child's privacy throughout their education. That's their purpose. And while Virginia schools have affirmed their commitment to following these laws, the real focus now shifts to making sure they're implemented effectively and transparently in everyday practice. It's about the follow-through.
Right. The implementation is key. And with that in mind, here's maybe a final thought for you to consider. What specific questions do you now have for your local school board, regarding their policies and their actual day-to-day practices around student data privacy? We definitely encourage you to seek out that information, ask those questions, and engage with your schools to ensure these important protections are being fully upheld for your kids.